Welcome everybody, I'm Pete Meier at Motor Age magazine. This is my cohort in crime.
Truglia from TST. And behind the camera, Doreen and our buddy Pierre Rispo, the Vice President of TST. And we even have Alex sitting in the background.
Right in the corner head. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time to hang out on tonight's webcast. Tonight's webcast is AC service and repair tips for the next generation. A little something different. We've done AC a couple of times here. Noise in the peanut gallery. But we've done this topic a few times. We've covered, a lot of the basics of AC service and repair, but we've got some pretty
new stuff and neat
that
stuff.
Should be pretty cool.
And let's remind everyone, both on the Motor Age channel and on the TST YouTube channel, you can see those other webcasts that we did, covering all the basic and safety items, because that's important, working with air conditioning.
Right. And a lot of material there.
Oh, a lot.
Of, not just the webinars we've done, but a lot of short 10-minute, 15-minute training videos. No shortage of resources between TST and MotorAge.com.
That's right. We have tons of information just for you guys.
Just for some housekeeping, again, we appreciate you hanging in with us, those of us who logged on right, and those who haven't, we hope you get your connections correct. So
you can always see us on YouTube.
You can always see the review. During the course of the webinar, if you have any questions, use the chat function to type them in, and Pierre and Doreen will be keeping an eye on the chat window, and will let us know of questions as we take question breaks as we go along.
And we should say, since we're doing this live, just like you would do stuff in your shop, not everything goes exactly as planned, like our 5-minute delay because there weren't enough people that checked the right box. But that's okay. Things may happen, but we're going to get through it, as always. Things happen.
Now we're going to start off this evening with a little bit of something different. You may have read the articles I wrote in April, issue of Motor Age, concerning counterfeit 134A. Some of the stuff in those tanks is not just bad, it's dangerous. If you're not aware of R40 contaminants in 134A supplies, we have an expert standing by who's going to fill us in and answer our questions. Guys, not trying to be the guy that cried wolf. This is not a rampant problem. However, as the technical editor for the magazine, I don't want any of our readers to get hurt because we didn't tell them.
Exactly.
So at least you're going in with eyes open and the knowledge.
And the other thing, Pete, and sometimes in these containers, they may have sand in them for weight to take space up, or water in it. Besides some old R12 laying around, or R22, or God knows what else in that tank.
Well, the United States Army recently brought many vehicles that were in use in overseas, Afghanistan, Iraq. And in a recent report, 25% of those vehicles that were in theater are contaminated, have contaminated. And it's not just R40. There's like 18 different variations of that. But like I said, that's, I'm not an expert. I'm the information junkie. I try to go out and get it and bring it to you guys. That's why we do the webinars. So that we can bring those experts to you. And let me introduce Peter Coll. Peter is the Vice President at Neutronics Refrigerant Analysis. He's also on the Board of Directors for the Mobile Air Conditioning Society and a member of the SAE Interior Climate Control Committee. This is the man's business, is refrigerant. And,
no doubt.
I'm sure he has a lot to tell us. Peter,
especially with his identifier. It's good.
Pete, my pleasure. G, how are you?
Oh, not bad, my friend. How are you?
Check if can you hear that through okay, Peter?
I can hear that, yes. Sounds good.
All right, so we can hear you okay. Let's start off, Peter. Tell us a little bit, give us the facts on the R40 issue. Let's start with that.
Well, as you guys know, and hopefully members of the audience know, a couple of years ago there were some problems in the shipping container industry where they discovered some 134A that had been contaminated with, among other things, methyl chloride, which is R40. And in the servicing of several of those containers, unfortunately, at the time, 3 lives were lost. So what that caused was the shipping container companies and subsequently some of the air conditioning companies like Trane and Carrier, and trickled down through the DuPonts and Honeywells to start taking a closer look at the refrigerant supply. And they discovered a whole bunch of bad refrigerant that was either counterfeit or was just off-brand material that had this R40 in it.
Mm-hmm. Now was it the R40 or was it, if I remember reading right, it was a chemical reaction in the system with the aluminum components that was creating the dangerous issue?
Yeah, that's right, and that's what the investigation kind of led to was that R40 or methyl chloride was reacting with the aluminum under temperature and pressure, creating something called trimethyl aluminum, which is a liquid as the aluminum deteriorates, but it's highly explosive. And when that trimethyl aluminum would be exposed to air, it was causing these systems to explode. And you can just imagine for all the service techs out there that you're under hood and you're connecting a service hose under hood, and all of a sudden the entire thing blows up right in your face.
Yeah.
And so that was what happened there. There have only been a few incidents, none here in the U.S. Of that, but that's what caused everybody to take a close look at this, and they were very surprised at what they found.
Yeah. That's why it's always better to test and not guess, and use a sealant detector and an identifier to see what's in it.
Yeah. Now,
well, that's become more and more prevalent now, and if you look at the new SAE standards that are out for recovery machines, and a new one that I was made privy to this morning concerning another alternate refrigerant instead of 134A or 1234YF, they all now mandate that the refrigerant be tested before it's recovered. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we didn't have that with 134A, but lots of people are testing it, and you really should, and particularly the cylinders. The reality is you paid for this good, pure material, and that's what you should be getting.
Sure, absolutely, and as you mentioned, I mean, we're making R40 the initial topic of discussion because of the dangers inherent in it, but it's not here in the United States. But let's add a word to that yet.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if it's in, I know you guys have found it in the 30-pound containers that we're so used to buying. Maybe not here, but that doesn't mean that some of that might not find its way here. But there were other things too, right?
That's true.
They found like what, like the 18. I mean, it's not just R40. I mean, you're finding all kinds of soup in 134A containers, aren't you?
You know, R22 has become pretty popular, and 142B, and both of those were recently, in the past couple of years, added to the banned list by the EPA as part of the Montreal Protocol and then Kyoto Protocol and all the environmental stuff that's going on now. So what a lot of these companies that have excess of that material are doing is they're using it as filler in 134A because they really want to get rid of it because they can't sell it.
Yeah.
Sure. So it's finding its way into these off-brand cylinders. We're very fortunate here in the U.S. that our customs departments take a real close look at these cylinders coming in.
Mother Nature.
And while it can still happen, it's not as likely. It's a lot more difficult to do here than other countries. But we expect that to continue, and especially as the price of 134A over the next few years starts to rise as they begin to reduce supply.
Yeah.
Right. And Peter, you know, there's some containers, I'm sure you know better than I, that they have, like I said earlier, put either water or sand or something in it to fill it up, and when the shop goes to buy it, they're obviously not getting the full 30 pounds. So. Yeah,
that's correct too. And while you're not likely to find those at pick your favorite local auto parts store, you are going to find those on the internet. You are going to find those from the people who are sending you that flyer saying we got a special this week only, buy a skid for $52.
Right.
Because for you or for the average shop owner, when you buy something like that, you don't go to use it right away, and 30 pounds is 30 pounds.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So, and I guess that kind of leads me into the next question for you, Peter. You know, for all of these things, what can technicians and shop owners do to protect themselves?
Well, let's start with the first thing they can do, which is not identifying the refrigerant. Well, as much as I would like to say that, that's not number one. Number one is know your supplier. Know who's selling you the product.
Sure.
Know the brand you're buying of the product. If you're buying, pick one, a DuPont, a Honeywell, an Arkema, whoever it is, understand what their cylinder is supposed to look like, and don't always go for the least expensive deal just because the cylinder's blue.
Yeah.
So
But Peter, I have a comment on that. In the past, I've seen it with R12 years back, where the container really did look like the real deal. You know, pretty hard to tell that was maybe a counterfeit, and or the local supplier who you did trust, he may have been duped on a deal.
That's absolutely correct. We saw that a couple years ago in the Midwest with a very, very large nationwide distributor. Ended up with some bad material. So that was a problem and remains a problem. So the second thing we want to do after you've taken that initial step of knowing your supplier and so forth is you absolutely want to test the refrigerant before you use it. You want to grab an identifier, you want to test it, you want to make sure it says 100% 134A and all zeros for everything else, non-condensables and hydrocarbons and everything else.
Yeah.
At that point, you're good to put that on the back of your machine and start using it. And then, of course, because what we do with these recycling machines is we extract the refrigerant from the vehicle, we bring it into an internal tank, we mix it up with some fresh virgin stuff from that new tank you just bought, and we recharge it back in the car. So we want to make sure we test the car before we extract the refrigerant.
Yeah, and guys, that just makes good sense, because there's a lot of do-it-yourselfers out there. You don't know what they're trying to pump into their cars to get that system cool again. They're only coming to us because they couldn't do it themselves.
Right.
So you don't want to draw that into your system. You know, not at all.
Yeah, they're going to go to some of the big box stores and just buy that little can, put it in there, and God only knows what's in some of the cans.
Right,
There
right.
could be contamination in this big 30-pounder or in little cans.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me up to the next slide here. You know, of not just what's in that virgin tank, but what is in the car.
Yeah.
What is in the car? I mean, if you look real closely at this picture, this is a Volkswagen orifice tube. Here's the mesh side. Isn't that usually where you see the blockage? Well,
Yep.
this isn't.
Yep, that's right. And you know, especially if they've got some sealant in there, and you know, there's some different sealants out there these
Right.
days that you know, claim not to block up little holes and so forth. You know, maybe that's true, maybe it's not true. But if it doesn't block a little hole, I don't know how it's sealing anything. But yeah, those are the kind of problems that you do run into, and do-it-yourselfers are a main culprit of that. Used car dealers also, second problem.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, how can you blame them though, Peter? I mean, walk into Walmart or any of the big parts houses,
sure,
and look for their little do-it-yourself cans on the shelf. Darn near every single one of them now has not just refrigerant, but
a
some
sealant.
type of sealant in it.
Oh, we have a
Yeah,
question.
We have a
really
question,
hard
Peter.
to
Hold on.
find them without it.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it is hard to find it without. Good.
There's a question from Mike. Please explain what will happen when parts store personnel tells the customer to just add refrigerant.
Well, I mean, if you're a trained technician, because the question, if you didn't hear, the question was, how will the parts person tell the customer what will happen if they just keep adding refrigerant?
Or no, actually, the question was more explain to us what will happen when the personnel tell the customer to just add the refrigerant. What will happen down after that?
Yeah,
And this
after
is pretty common out there.
It
So
is
they're going to
very
say, just add, well, first of all, if refrigerant is missing, there must have been something that took its place, like air.
Yes.
And then you know they're not going to do it right. They're going to shake the can, do whatever, try to suck in as much on the low side as they can, and they're never going to get that system just right.
And I think
And
that's the critical question. Guys, the cars that we work on now, and if I remember right, the average age of the fleet, just found out at the Global Automotive Symposium, is like 11.6 years, right? That's
correct.
Okay, but every single one of those cars are using systems that use substantially less refrigerant than like the ones you and I grew up on.
Sure. I mean, you're talking, this is an important thing even for your refrigerant machines, that the scale is accurate.
Yes.
Because putting too much refrigerant is not going to make it colder, it's going to make it warmer.
But kind of answer the guy's question though, adding too much refrigerant, you're going to look at higher head pressures,
Right.
you're going to look at higher temperatures in the compressor, shorter compressor life. Nothing good.
Nothing good can come of it. Besides something blowing out.
Yeah, good for me, baby.
They have another question, unrelated to that part. A different Mike says, why did we see a spike in R134A last year? I think he means prices.
Spike in price?
Spike in price.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can answer that question, Peter. Peter, do you have any insight into the question of why there was a spike?
I can answer that one for you. We've seen it a couple of times now. The big reason is because the Chinese government has taken over the supply of the primary mineral that's used to make 134A. And when that happened, they essentially restricted the availability of that mineral, and that caused prices to rise. There was also some profit taking, that's for sure. There was also some concern that there'd be a shortage because they wouldn't release enough of the mineral. When all that was said and done, what you saw was a lot of the Chinese refrigerants coming down in price because the Chinese government made it inexpensive for the Chinese companies to buy the refrigerant or buy that mineral.
Sure, let's
but
just slam
the other companies paid a lot more money.
Sure.
So wait until that happens to 1234YF. Where's it made? In China.
But we're going to get there. We're going to get there. I want to finish with one last topic here, Peter, on the subject where we started with the products that may or may not, restrict the system. As a side note, guys, nearly every compressor or machine warranty that I looked at, it will not honor the warranty if there's any sealant in the system. You're the shop owner, you're the tech, you have to make your own call if you're going to use the stuff and go by the claims that they have. Or you can invest in a very simple test device that Neutronics makes that looks for any type of additive in the system that will restrict a hole.
And by the way, here's a real world thing that happened to me. I had a guy renting my shop out, and he wasn't testing, even though he had the equipment, he was too lazy. He wasn't testing for sealant. Oh, he clogged 2 machines up on me. Lucky I had some connections to get them fixed. But the average shop, if you don't have connections, your machine is going to be pretty much toast. So if you don't test, and we're talking about sealant detector, and they're not that expensive, Neutronics has, and it's not a commercial for them, but they have a very reasonable price kit that you can see if there's something in it. Always test that first before identifying. Oh, another question.
Another question. He says, this guy James, I'm an auto tech student in Minnesota.
Hey, James.
It's too cold there, James. Don't worry about it.
We don't need air conditioning. Right. He asks why the EPA allows the sale of refrigerants with sealants in them. And in the big box stores, the big chain stores.
Now, we're going to tell you, Mother Nature is going crazy in case you hear a lot of noise in the background. It's not 4th of July. People would love to be up here for a barbecue and some sun, but unfortunately, up here in New York, it's raining very heavy. So let's repeat that question and have Peter answer it, please.
The question is why would the EPA allow the DIY cans to be sold with the sealant in them? So, Peter, you want to take that one on?
Sure. The first question is why do they allow DIY cans to be sold at all?
Very good.
Right. We don't have that much time.
That's the real question that we want to ask. As far as it being allowed to be sold with sealant, remember what the Environmental Protection Agency is all about. They're about protecting the environment. It's not their responsibility, although we would like it to be, to protect the consumer from putting a substance in his vehicle that will damage it. It's their job to look at these substances and say, will they damage the environment? Not will they hurt the car. So they'd really be restricting trade if they were allowed to do that. We would like to see them ban or at least require a 609 license to buy 134A at all. And reality is, we all know you can get a 609 license with a quick test that an 11-year-old can pass and $15 on a credit card.
Yes. Exactly.
Yep.
That is true.
All right. Wait, another question.
One other question. What if you don't have an identifier?
Russian roulette.
What do you do if you don't have an identifier? Go invest in one. Quite simply. And you can buy very simple go, no-go identifiers for a few $100s, like $400 or $500.
In fact, I believe they have a junior, right, Peter? Don't you have a junior identifier that's a technician could afford?
There's a mini, for those people who want to look and there's a whole bunch that are made by us that have other people's names on them. So it's really all the same thing. But I look today, and on eBay, I can buy them brand new for probably a little under $400.
Yeah.
And that's going to be pass or fail for 134A. It's going to be perfectly suitable for those cylinders and very useful for the vehicles.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad price to pay when you're talking about saving your air conditioning equipment and your AC supply.
And
because you
doing the right
contaminate it.
job
And
for your customer.
No
You know,
doubt.
now maybe, maybe I brought my contaminated car into your shop, you sucked it in to your machine, but now my wife's uncontaminated system is serviced in your shop, and now it's not so uncontaminated.
Yeah, and over the years, I have a piece of equipment called the scavenger that used to be made years back. And we use it to suck out refrigerant that's mixed or flammable or whatever.
Sure.
And that machine came in quite handy over the years.
Yeah.
And this is kind of related to that, actually. The guy Scott says, what do I do if a customer's car comes in with sealant in the system? How do I evac the system?
Okay, the question
That's
is,
another great question.
if you do discover there's sealant in the system, what do you do? How do you take care of that customer?
Well, there's I'll give a quick answer. I know Peter knows more than myself. But the air guard thing by, I think it's AirSep, if I'm not mistaken, is the company. That works quite well. What is it? I'm sorry, say that again.
Charge guard?
Charge guard, that's it.
The charge guard or recycle guard.
Yeah. So there are products in the market that will kind of like filter that out before it gets to your machine. But I will tell you, it was interesting, we were going to be using a Jeep here later on, and I was doing some digging on the AC system there, just happened to run across the TSP from Chrysler that said if you find any sealant in their products, everything in the system has to be replaced. That's their TSP, that's their policy.
And let's talk about sealant, any type of sealant. All it is a Band-Aid when you need surgery and stitches.
Yeah.
The Band-Aid ain't gonna work. It's like a bad head gasket, right? People put in some
Yeah,
stuff.
the liquid seal.
It's not gonna work overall. The bottom line is, we're in business as professionals to diagnose and repair vehicles correctly. So we need to do the proper job. Find out where the leak is and fix it.
Yeah.
Don't put sealant in, it's just a ridiculous thing to do. Everyone tells you you're getting rid of the car next week, in 3 months, it's only a station car. Look, fix it right and you won't have problems, and it'll be better for all of us in the industry because we won't get cross-contamination.
But going back to the gentleman's question, it wasn't a matter of whether the tech did it wrong.
It's someone else.
Said he went to Walmart and he got in the DIY can and it was in there, and now it's in the car because he couldn't get it fixed. Now it's sitting in your bay. What do you tell him?
And I'm sure there's a bunch of them. So your best protection is buying one of those AirSep products. As far as I know, that's the only company, maybe others.
I know that makes one.
And Peter, do you know any others out there besides the AirSep?
No, AirSep makes the filter that you want to use for that. And to further the answer is find it, filter it, flush it. And whoever asked that question did the first part. They said, got a vehicle that came in and it had seal in it. Well, we did the first thing, which is find it.
Right.
The next thing is make sure the filters are installed in between the vehicle and the AC service machine. And then after that, you need to flush all of the oil out of the system because those filters are going to capture any sealant that's coming out with the refrigerant and a little bit of oil that comes out these days.
Right.
But you need to get the rest of that oil out. And then lastly, you still have a bit of an issue because if any of that sealant has cured in any of the components in the vehicle, you won't know it until you're done doing the service.
Yeah.
So you can service it, you can service it safely. The only question is we don't know what it's going to cost to service it when it's all said and done because we don't know what has to be replaced.
So be informed and make sure that you inform your customer.
Right. Now, Peter, I have a question for you. How about installing one of the filters in line in the AC system? They have a lot of these filters that catch debris. Would that help with any sealant?
Generally, those filters aren't going to help with sealant only because they would only catch cured sealant that's already cured and now is floating around in the system.
Yeah,
right.
Because those filters are designed to allow the liquids to pass through it.
Yeah, good.
Good. Perfect response. We have another question.
One more question. Please explain to us why the DIY can will not work. In other words, why those people buying sealants in a can to fix their car, why it doesn't work.
Okay, well the question is why the DIY can won't work. I think, well, we've pretty much covered the sealant. Okay? And we're not telling you that it will or will not work. It might fix your car,
Right.
But what is the downside of that as a professional that you're going to have to deal with in the long run? So You know, we're not here to say that. We're here to say there's a lot more con than there is pro. So we'll cover that issue. As far as the cans themselves, again, you're looking at systems with a very small charge. Maybe even 1 ounce can put you outside an acceptable tolerance.
No doubt.
You cannot control that. Holding a can and shaking it in your hand, like, you know, I'm not going to do it because it's kind of weird, but those shaker exercise bars, you're not going to do that. You're going to get the same result, right?
Exactly.
But you cannot do an accurate addition. You can't top off a 134A system.
Personally, you shouldn't top off any system. The proper thing is to recover it all and then put the right amount in, even if you need any oil, make sure you put it in there.
Yeah. So I guess that should answer it. We need to move on with that.
Yeah, we exactly.
Need to move on.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, the next topic, and guys, if you have any more questions, by all means, send them to us. You can get us on, Motor Age has a presence on Facebook, LinkedIn, all the social media sites. They're easy to find. Send us your questions. We'll be glad to answer them if we don't get to them tonight. Peter,
if I were you, I'd run now, Dave. It sounds like they're coming out.
You hear that? Yeah,
Thanks,
that's because I got that R40 can back here in the back.
That's it. They know you're online.
This is great. We got all the sound effects going for you tonight. The next topic I want to get into is the status of the so-called replacement HFO 1234YF. If you've been keeping up the last few years,
Very
this has been an ongoing story.
right?
Let me say off the bat right now, very few cars in the United States are using it. Very few. The odds of you having to deal with it, unless you're in the collision business, probably not going to be anytime soon. So we're not worried about that. But what's at stake here now is that Daimler said to the EU, where all this started, we're not going to do it.
Yeah. So
and
Mercedes,
just refused.
right? Mercedes had it at one point, took it out, and now it's.
They actually recalled a few American models and converted them over again.
Yeah.
So the SAE committee, actually this cooperative research project with several manufacturers involved, revisited all the studies and tests, reviewed all of Daimler's information, and came up with the same conclusion that there's nothing wrong with HFO 1234YF. But that, to me, I'd say, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think now some of the things that we thought were dead and gone as far as alternatives are now back on the table again. What do you think?
Well, yeah, you're right. Some of the ones that we thought were dead and gone are dead and gone, but they've got new cousins. And the new cousins, which was just recently announced
That's nice.
to the public anyway, AC5 and AC6, are products from Nexichem. They are 3-component blends of refrigerant. One of the components, and again, this has already been published, so I can tell you, is CO2 in one of the blends. And so they're taking a serious look at that. And let's remember why we're doing all this. We're doing this because the European Union decided that vehicles going forward couldn't have 134A in them anymore from the factory after a certain point in time because of its global warming potential was too high. So they had to come out with a substitute that had a low global warming potential, and 1234YF was universally picked, and then we had the little Daimler problems, and now they're looking at other alternatives. And if the European law stands, we are going to have new refrigerants in the market, and we see no reason why or no indication that the European law won't stand.
Right.
18 months for me, about 18 months before you've ever seen an AC5 or AC6 car on the road, if it does go forward. But 1234YF cars are being filled every day, and I think Daimler has a design issue because it's only Daimler.
Yeah, and Peter, that brings up a major problem. If there's going to be more than one refrigerant used out there, what in the world are aftermarket shops going to do? They're going to have to buy multiple pieces of equipment.
Again.
They're going to have to pick and choose, and that's going to be the problem. And so we had a lot of people early on in the 1234YF days complain that, that this was, we're not going to switch refrigerants, we don't want to switch refrigerants. Well, it's happening, and those who complained about whether it's flammability or other properties of 1234YF, all they've been able to do is just allow other products in the market to make it more difficult to service all makes and all models.
Yeah.
And in the end, you're going to end up with some vehicles that will be dealer service only. They'll show up in your shop, and you'll look at it, and you'll say, don't service those. Only place I know is the dealer. Got to go back to the dealer.
See, that's really unfair. Where's the right to repair on that one?
Yeah, and then
Well,
let me
you
just,
have the right to repair. That's really the case. You have the right to repair. Unfortunately, it's the investment that
Yeah.
you have
Right.
to make in the equipment to repair those. So you're going to have to use the 90-10 rule. If 90% of the cars have 1234YF and 10% have something else, you may have to let those 10% go. And those customers aren't going to be happy having to go back to the dealer and get them serviced.
Exactly.
yeah. And again, we're not talking about something that's going to hit us tomorrow. You know, a lot of these, because this is only required in
Right.
the European Union. No other country in the world is.
Yeah, only required in Europe as a mandatory thing going forward. And in the U.S., you'll see Cadillac has it, Honda has an electric vehicle out in California with it.
Yeah.
Chrysler's about to bring a new Jeep in June to the U.S. market that has it. And they're doing it primarily because they get credits against their mile per gallon requirement
Right.
going forward for using environmentally friendly fluids.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're talking 1234YF right there.
Yes. Yes.
Just so everyone's
That's right.
clear
They'll
on it.
also get a credit for AC5 or AC6 if they use that in the future.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very good.
Now, we did have another question from Mike, another Mike. Some shop owners say the American refrigerant is better than the Chinese. Is this a myth?
The question
That is a myth. The majority of refrigerant is made in China, whether it's got an American brand or not. And there's a standard, AHRI 700, which governs the purity requirement for the refrigerant. And if it's good quality 134A, regardless of the country of origin, it meets AHRI 700. Now, there are some advantages to some of the bigger name brand refrigerants where they may be slightly more pure. However, when we talk about slightly more pure, we're talking about parts per million purity.
Yeah.
And
Very small.
Great example, the 1234YF that's being supplied today is made in China,
Yeah.
but it's branded for American companies.
Right. All right.
All right, any questions that anyone has there for Peter?
Peter?
Yeah, actually, guy Jesse says, I work on heavy-duty trucks. Have you heard of a new AC system being used in them?
So anything, Peter, for heavy-duty trucks, new AC.
Yeah, what you might see in some of the heavy-duty trucks is some red dot stuff, and red dot is looking closely at CO2, carbon dioxide. They also played a little bit with 152A.
Ah.
So the heavy-duty industry is not governed by the same rules as the passenger car automotive industry, just the same way that the buses are not governed by those same rules. So you may see some different things in the heavy-duty trucks.
Interesting.
And I'll give a little plug out there. You know, MACS Mobile Air Conditioning Society at their training event every year does some real nice stuff with the heavy-duty industry.
They do.
And that's a great place to learn those type of things from the heavy-duty folks.
Do you know those
themselves.
dates right offhand, Peter, when next year's?
Probably in February, right?
January 16th through the 18th, I think. I had the information.
In New Orleans, and I was
Yes,
just there, actually at the hotel where it's going to be held at.
Oh,
And,
lucky you.
we're really looking forward to it. If you haven't been to New Orleans since Katrina and so forth,
Come down.
it's all back. It's all back to normal, and the food's as good as it ever was, and the bars are as good, and so are the beach.
So
That's true.
Yeah, okay. I won't go there.
Acme Oyster House. What a great place to go.
Okay, we'll take one last question.
It's not even a question. This is a comment from somebody. He says, if you use CO2, you only need special gauges. You do not need to recover CO2. He says, I have worked on these systems since 2001 with no problems. The vehicles are in California and also on the East Coast. People who lease the vehicles do not know it is CO2. They think it's a normal AC heater system.
Huh. Are you aware of anything like that?
Okay. Yep, let's talk about that. You are correct. You do not need to recover CO2.
Yeah.
There are some drawbacks to CO2 that the manufacturers have found in passenger vehicles, and one of those drawbacks that's still being looked at, but a problem they've discovered is the environmental benefit that you get from the zero global warming potential number of CO2 unfortunately looks to be offset by additional fuel consumption that's required to power that compressor.
Yeah, because that operates under
That's high
extremely
pressure.
high pressure.
Right, real
Yes.
high pressure.
Yeah.
So from a recovery standpoint, no, you do not need to recover it. You do need special equipment to be able to charge it. And the other thing that they're looking at is from a big picture is what OSHA requirements would you have for all the small garages that want to charge this? Do they need things like steel-braided lines and so forth?
Yeah.
CO2 has been approved by the EPA. It's on the SNAP list. You
Yes.
could use it if you had a system designed for it.
And Peter, if I'm not mistaken, the military have used this for years, but in a bigger vehicle, it's easier to have heavy-duty plumbing per se
Right.
for the vehicle rather than on a passenger car. So this gentleman,
That's right.
yeah, and this gentleman who asked the question said he wasn't, and correct me, Pierre, if I'm wrong, he wasn't using any special equipment.
No. He said you only need special
Oh, you
occasions.
only need, okay.
He's also added, by the way, after that, a new line. These are fuel cell vehicles. There is no difference in emissions.
Okay, well, yeah, because you're looking at the fuel cell
Fuel
is
cell,
one of the,
sure.
and there were other considerations,
right.
but as Peter pointed out, it is on the SNAP list. It can be used if a manufacturer decides to design a system to use in that car, and there's a lot more information. In fact, r744.com if you want to learn
Right.
more about the CO2 systems. Well, Peter, we're going to cut you loose.
And thank you so much once again, Peter. We always appreciate your time, all your expertise, and the update on what's going on out there.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Gentlemen, my pleasure. You guys have an outstanding night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Okay, so we're going to be moving on. Peter?
Okay, next on the agenda. Okay, now we're going to get into some meat and potatoes stuff. And some of the diagnostic tips that we want to share. The first one I want to talk to you about is diagnosing a very common complaint, no clutch engagement, when the customer comes in. And of course, you know, gee, there's a lot of things that can cause
No doubt.
no clutch engagement.
Correct.
There could be an electrical issue. There could be low refrigerant in the system. There could be a mechanical fault in the compressor. I want to share with you.
And it could be computer control.
Yeah, absolutely. The PCM may not be turning it on in the first place.
Right.
So I want to show you a little trick that you can use that can help you very quickly determine at least what area of the
you're going.
system you want to go to. Of course, we talk a lot about, do you pinpoint test, do you general test? I love the way Jim Morton talks about that.
Yep.
You know, general test, what can I do that was going to tell me a whole lot real quick? Get it narrowed down and pinpoint, home in on the exact problem. Well, this is a general test. And what we're going to do is use the low amp clamp. Take a look at the schematic for the relay that controls the compressor clutch. A lot of times you'll find the same fuse that powers the clutch also powers the solenoid
Correct.
in the relay. So you may only have to make the one connection. Okay. So this is what we're doing in this particular example. I'm just using a fuse jumper lead to replace the fuse that feeds the power to those two circuits. I have my low amp clamp there. And you're only going to get 1 of 3 readings when you go to turn the AC system on. Of course, you got to start it up, turn the AC on, expect to see the clutch engage. The first one is going to be, of course, nothing, no amps.
Then you know you got a problem.
Sure, so guys, what do you think that tells you? Well, we kind of cheated, it's kind of written on there, but the relay itself has not turned on.
Correct.
Okay, and we're talking about the solenoid side of the relay has not turned on. Okay, what would be the load, if you will, in that circuit? And that can be caused by the electrical, could be caused by low refrigerant or any other input
That
the
goes to the
PCM
PCMCs.
needs to turn that on. But that's where you're going to start your troubleshooting, right there.
Correct.
That side of the circuit. Okay.
And let's not forget, if there's a DTC in that PCM, it may not control that.
May not control that either. But why hook up a scan tool? Why hook up the R&R machine? You know, why do any of that until you know that that's the area that you want to check into?
Correct.
Okay, now the next possible reading you might get when you turn the AC compressor on is a reading of maybe less than half an amp. Okay, now of course, we're reading 0.038 on the illustration, but in the low amp clamp, we have to bump that up by 10,
10, right.
to get the amperage conversion, right? This is reading in millivolts.
Correct.
We have to make that conversion. So, if using a regular clamp on, amp clamp, then you'll get the direct reading. But we're reading less than half an amp.
Correct.
Well, now we know that the relay control is on. The PCM completed the circuit. It's seen everything it needs to see. It's not a problem with refrigerant charge.
Right.
The relay itself has been commanded on, and that circuit's flowing current. Now it has to be on the other side. It has to be on the coil or the clutch compressor coil circuit.
Correct. It's not getting.
Could be the relay itself, contacts in the relay. Could be anything in the wiring, anything at all like that. But now that's the side I'm going to go work on. And that's not that big a circuit to work on, right?
Nope.
Not that big a deal.
Don't forget grounds. A lot of people forget the grounds.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be one of the things we
The
check
ground
there.
is important. Very good for you.
And the next possible reading is somewhere between, for a clutch, 2 to 4 amps. Okay. If I'm reading 2 to 4 amps and the compressor is not engaged, what has to be the problem? I'm going to wait a second, see if anybody watching can answer that question.
And we should remind them again here what they're looking at, 0.38. That's not 381 milliamps.
Right. You have
That's
to
3
multiply
amps,
that 10.
810.
Yeah, 3.8 amps.
That's a big mistake, by the way, when you use a low current clamp, blah, blah, as you're waiting for some answers here. This is 3 amps, 810 milliamps when you're using your amp clamp on the meter.
Okay, we have some answers.
Any
Answer.
One says clutch slipping, one says bad clutch assembly, and the other one says compressor no good.
Okay, well, we're all pretty close on all three. The answer is there's got to be a mechanical problem with the clutch. Maybe there is too much air gap.
Correct.
Clutch can't pull in. Maybe it's separated internally. And some of these compressors are buried.
Oh, they're buried.
Okay, so if I don't have any engagement and I go do my little quick test here, well, now I know I have to go digging for the clutch.
Exactly.
Right, but it's very quick, only takes a few minutes. Now the Jeep that we're going to use a little bit later on, a little more involved. There's one fuse going to the clutch.
The clutch.
Well, we can take that current measurement there, or we have to tap into wire near the PCM so we get a clean reading on just the relay control. But you can still use this technique. If you don't want to go through all that trouble, I want to share this tool with you. AES Wave, and this is not a plug for them, but it's a neat little tool. It's called the U-Activate. It's for testing relay circuits, and this plugs in place of the relay. And it comes with all the adapters, so it'll
fit everything.
with quite a few. And we're all used to relay testers that allow you to turn the relay on and off. There's several, some with a little push button on top, so that you can, we've swapped relays, we've jumpered relays, we've done all of that. But what I liked about this tool was that solenoid side. How do you test that? Well, if you notice right here, this section of the tool is connected to the solenoid side. And when that lights up, it's been turned on. And the load here is just about the same as the load the relay would place. So if you want to do a voltage drop on the PCM side, you can do it right here using this pin.
Which is kind of
You are right next to the load, so you're going to measure the entire circuit path. Very quick. You can check it right here. Nice little tool to have. Would make doing the Jeep using the technique a piece of cake to check.
And again, that's at aeswave.com. I'll plug. George makes some nice stuff.
Next thing, we've all used infrared thermometers, right? And most of you guys probably have them in your toolbox. But I think G has a few things to share, talking about IR thermometers from some folks over at General Tools. Right?
General Tools. This is a little bit different than this type of gun that we've been using for years. The nice thing with this is I'm going to put this over here and point it towards the Jeep. And we're going to see it is, the green light comes on. Could you get that in the picture? Red light? No, still can't get it?
Yeah, it's in. You got it now.
Okay, so we have a red light. Let me just do this when I get it focused in. Are you on? Green light?
Yep.
Watch it. If I put my hand in front of it, anytime the temperature changes, it'll go from green to red. Could I see that here?
Yes,
This
perfect.
is really neat. When we start this vehicle up in a few minutes, we could see the temperature change with this gun. It gives us a readout. I don't know if you can see what the temperature is right there.
76.5.
Very good, locked in. So, do you want to start this up and
Sure.
we'll kind of look at this? So this is a quick, important tool to use. It's nice when you do have a laser pointer. And I'm not sure if they can see over there. Can you see that little red dot?
Yeah.
Okay? So what I'm
Hey,
looking
go
at,
down a little bit.
it was 80 something degrees, and we're gonna see if this starts changing temperature.
Yeah, a little more down. There. See?
Just trying to get it in there.
Zoom out.
Gotcha, gotcha. I can't almost see it.
Well, we'll just go up top.
There it is.
So right now, I'm on the high line,
Yeah.
and I'm at 121 degrees.
Could zoom down a little bit. It'll be easier.
And the nice thing is, on this particular one, if it does change temperature, it actually will tell you what your reference temperature was, where you started. If it got colder than that, it'll go to blue, and if it gets hotter, it'll go to red. So this,
I think
again,
we
is
also
a
think
pretty
about
neat
that,
tool.
that thing too, is that you can adjust that reference temperature. And then
Yeah, up or down.
and if you want to see if there's a restriction in the condenser or the radiator, you can set that reference temperature and then kind of scan it along, waiting for that green to go either way.
Right.
And letting you know that you hit a spot that's not.
And again, there's my blue, there's my green. And I'm sure if I get it in there, we can get, there we go, there's my red. I had all three of them, and that was able to be seen here.
Yes, you can see that.
This is a new tool out by General, an IRT C50. Really nice tool, I just got it the other day, and I think it's quite helpful for air conditioning.
Yeah, and not just air conditioning, but the infrared thermometers.
Oh, for many.
All kinds of things. I mean, like I said, most of us have one in our toolbox, and now they've gotten to a price that, I mean, they're really affordable. They're not the $200-300 stuff
That was first right.
Yeah.
And these are good even for brake problems, there's a caliper sticking, whatever.
Bearings,
Bearings,
pliers,
just quick.
just a bunch of
But now one step up from there is a thermal imager. And a thermal imager, we're going to be taking a look live at in a second. This thermal imager we'll be using from General, the GT I-10. Yeah, we got a good view. This thermal imager is pretty neat for a lot of different things. In fact, if you look at some of our webcasts, we've used it on electrical problems. Also, Motor Age, this month, if I'm not mistaken,
They issue.
they issue.
There's your article of thermal imaging by Tony Martin.
Tony Martin, Tony has checked it, definitely checked it out. So let's bring this over to the vehicle, and we're going to be focusing on the screen here. So now watch what happens. You're going to see the yellow line starting to disappear. Compressor's off. We still got the heat from the inside of the vehicle being transferred out to the condenser. And notice now it's starting to get a darker color. And by the way, on the spectrum scale, the lighter the color, the hotter it is. So now you start to see it's turning, it's turning. Oh, there we go. We're
Now
totally
look
off.
at that.
Okay, now it's totally off. You see it's all purple. Pete, put it on.
Yeah.
Okay, now you can hear the clutch went on. You can start to see the purple is getting lighter. It's going to go. You can start to see the tubes. It looks like an orange, purple-orange color. And now it's going to turn into a bright, like yellow type of color, or white color. Sorry about the unsteady hand here. So what is this used for? Basically, this is a very good tool to use to see if there are any problems in the condenser, any clogs. We could also, I'm going to show you what an alternator looks like. Not that we're doing alternators, but you can see how hot that alternator actually is.
Hey guys, it's thermal imaging, as you'll read in the article. This is a fairly new diagnostic process. I know guys on ITN actually played around with this a few years back, but the cost of the tools is getting to the point where they're more affordable. there's so much that you can do with thermal imaging. And again, the article that Tony put together gave some great examples. What if you wanted to look for a misfiring cylinder? You know, if I can get that imager on the manifold, I'll see the cooler cylinder. If I want to check condenser or radiator for restrictions, if I want to see which hub bearing is bad by looking at which one's hotter, anything that you can do with the IR thermometer, think of it this way. The IR thermometer is the multimeter. This is the lab scope of thermal imaging. And I think there's going to be a lot of techniques that as more guys get to try these and put them to work in the field, you know, you're going to find a lot more uses for them. But yes, there is a learning curve, especially with a device like this one. And I'm going to mess this word up. I apologize in advance. It's called emissivity.
Actually, you got it right.
Okay.
Emissivity.
So I got
different things emit different IR wavelengths at the same temperature.
Yes.
So you have to know what you're measuring.
But the rule of thumb is if you're trying to measure a nice shiny aluminum line, that's going to measure differently than a flat hose or the condenser that you saw
And
earlier.
basically what I have this on right now is the orifice tube.
Yeah, notice real closely, on the right side of the picture, that's the high pressure line coming into the orifice, and on the left is where it's passing through. What happens at the orifice tube? The pressure drops and the temperature drops. You're seeing it right there for yourself. Now imagine you're looking for a line restriction, and you're going down the line and you see that. And guess what? You just found your restriction.
Alex, can you turn the AC off so they can see this?
So we have a question.
There's a question. Could I use thermal imaging to find an AC leak?
You know, you know, if you were doing an AC leak, that would be an interesting experiment. Because if that gas is passing enough to cause a temperature drop, you might. I won't say that you can, but you know what? We have got some really cool ways to find leak detection coming up in just a few more minutes.
And you know, this being something new, as new things come out, you got to play with them and you got to document them.
Yeah.
Now look at the orifice tube right now with the air condition off.
Right? Nothing's flowing.
Nothing's flowing. Alex, put it on. Watch the change as a refrigerant. So this is a great test to see if the orifice tube is actually working. Is it clogged rather than you cutting it open? So keep looking at it. You're going to notice that the color is changing. Remember, the lighter the color, the hotter it is. And there you go. Look at it. All the way to what side of the screen, Pete?
127 over there.
But what side is the hot side?
Hot side on the right. Yeah, hot side on the right. You can see it really bright yellow. The temperature graph all the way to the right of the screen. You know, almost white. The hottest point, dark blue, black. It's the coolest on this particular
And
color.
look at
Coolest was 35 degrees.
Look at the evaporator. I mean the
accumulator.
accumulator. Thank you. So this is a neat tool. And by the way, for electrical problems, catalytic converters, and one nice thing here about the general tool, they have them in different temperature ranges, even up to over 1000 C, which is good enough to do most catalytic converter things. So let's move on now to some other stuff. Any questions on that, Pierre?
No, that's it.
Okay, so a neat tool for you to use, not just to play around with, but actually to diagnose.
Actually, I was in the other area. There was a question.
Okay.
This guy says, "I'm curious. What would a partially charged system look like?"
Well, again, what would a partially charged system look like? Most likely all those fins that we've seen turning the bright yellow color, most likely would not, I would think. But we would have to play with that. This is something...
And like I said, we're both kind of new to this tool ourselves. There is a way that you can set the temperature range. If you notice on the scale on the right, it went from this number on the high point to this number on the low point. And I'm sure that there's an adjustment on the tool, and the good folks in general, I'm sure, can tell us. But I'm sure there's a way to adjust that band down. Let's say that I wanted to look for a temperature change from the condenser. What's normal from top to bottom? About 40 degrees?
Right.
So if I set that range up, I could use that to scan across to see how it flows through the condenser more accurately. Right. This is like, you know, and what I told folks before. Remember, older guys, remember the first time you saw a fuel pump current pattern on an old choppy flute scope? You know, and you went, wow, that's just the neatest thing since sliced bread. Well, now it's kind of a common troubleshooting procedure for most of us. That's what thermal imaging is here.
And in fact, it takes years of testing. Talking about that, Don Schnell, when we did the ATTACS program, the AMPS current program, we did hundreds of cars, and it took over a year or so of study with a bunch of different people that we all had the same amp clamp, same lab scope, to justify saying, this is good, this is a known good, this is a known bad.
Right.
What I would suggest with something like this, we would have to put an air conditioning machine there, remove half the charge, see what it looks like, then fully charge it, totally discharge it, and then see what the difference
Well,
is.
the neat thing too is this particular tool allows you to take the camera image,
Oh, right.
right, and keep that image as a reference. So, you know, if you had that and you were learning how to use that tool, you got a car in with a problem, you take a few pictures,
Yeah,
right?
but,
You diagnose it.
yeah, we should tell everyone this has a mini SD
SD
card. So these pictures, I just take them and put them right on my computer, and bingo. This is something you can show your customer and prove, I gotta cut that line open for that orifice tube. This is your problem, why the vehicle is not getting cold.
Yep.
It justifies things, but it is a learning curve.
Sure.
No doubt. Question.
The question was, what's the price on the tool?
Oh boy, you know, I don't remember off the top of my head. I would say it's somewhere, and again, just a ballpark range of about $1,900, depending on the temperature range you get.
Yeah. Probably about the same as an intermediate scan tool, right?
But again, the difference here, you know, is anything like this, and this is a great tool, but this is more of a thermo temperature gun. It is not it's a thermometer more so.
Right.
This is a thermal imager. So it's like the old graphometer, like you said, and here's the lab scope.
Well, this is not even graphic, that's like this plain old multimeter.
Yeah, well, multimeter type thing. This is the way to go. By the way, you want to see a real window defroster that's not working right?
Yeah.
Boom, this thing is
Yeah, imagine
perfect.
seeing that grid.
You want to see a catalytic converter, we have a lot of different pictures on these things. Really neat, but that's for another day. We're on AC.
Yeah, we can do it.
Any other questions before we move on?
I think that's it.
Okay.
No, that's it.
Okay, we're going to move real quickly into leak detection tips, as that came up earlier. The first thing that I want to share with you guys is if you're in the market for a tool, and I'm not particularly going to say you have to go with this manufacturer, but there's a fairly new standard. It's SAE J2791 for leak detection. And the reason the standard is upgraded is because, again, the system charges are so small. We've got to be able to find those smaller leaks.
No doubt.
Now the tools certified to this standard can detect as little as 1/4 of an ounce per year leak rate, which is nothing. There's nothing.
Small.
I mean, in the old days, compressor shaft seals would leak twice that much and be considered okay.
Right.
So now we're trying to find the smaller leaks. And if you're used to using your older leak detector and every time you pass by grease or gas, you know, we got set off by it seemed everything. Well,
You've been blowing on.
yeah, these can't. These have to be certified that they will not trigger off of most of the chemicals that you find under the hood. Now, I want to caution you though, and this is why I wanted to include this tonight, there are models available for sale on the tool trucks that can say you have the 3 levels of sensitivity, that they'll detect a 1/4 ounce per year, and they will, but they'll detect if you pass gas in the other bay, it'll go off.
And by the way, Pierre just did that, so we won't even go there.
So it would be sensitive, but it doesn't say 2791
Right,
on the
it's
box, then it's not certified to that standard, okay? So if you're in the market, number one, consider that.
Right, so that is the SAE-J standard for a leak detector. Very important to make sure you check that. And there are a few manufacturers out there.
Oh, there's several
Obviously
available that
with
do meet the standard.
Okay.
The next thing I point out, if you're going to use a leak detector, hey guys, I'm from Florida. In the summer months, we're looking at 90 degrees and up temperature, high humidity. We did not, well, I won't say the last 5 years of my career, I worked in a AC shop. But all the rest of those years, the only AC we got was the windows open and the wind blowing. It's a little hard to detect refrigerant leaks with a sniffer when there's a breeze blowing through the shop.
That's
Okay.
true.
Now, the new standard, part of the new standard is that it can pick up that 1/4 ounce leak from 3 inches away as opposed to the old 2,
Right.
and moving twice as fast as you could move the old sniffer to detect that smaller leak. But you do still have to have a little patience. You have to move it slow. You have to check all the way around the fittings and take your time.
And definitely, since refrigerant is heavier, a lot of it will be under the line.
Right.
Even though this, you should go all the way around, it's a good idea, since refrigerant is heavier than air, to check low as possible.
Yeah.
And when you're doing the low side, and don't forget the tube, but when doing the low side, make sure the compressor is off, because the pressure is higher on the low side with it off.
Sure.
It's equalized.
Sure.
The other thing to do is the drip hole. And we're not saying stick it in water dripping out of it, but we could have a problem, you know, that is in the evaporator inside.
Right. Another good access point is to pull the blower resistor and go into the box that way.
In fact, that's a way better way, because there's no way
No water.
air is going to get, water is going to get in there, and that could be a problem.
And if you do make the investment in a 2791, guys, this is a lab quality tool. You don't throw this on your toolbox, you know, you treat it with a little respect so you
Right.
don't mess it up.
This is expensive, no doubt.
No, but as we promised, this was tips for the next generation. Here's a great way to go looking for leaks. How about using the sound of that hiss to find the leak?
And I'm going to tell you a real story. When he's walking over here, he'll just grab me that bottom kit. And a few years back, my daughter had a vehicle, and she had an issue with a very slow leak. Now, we used dye, we used a whole bunch of stuff, to make a long story short. You know, one of the things that we have to learn about dye is, number one, not all dyes are the same, not all black lights are the same. There is a great little tool, I don't know where it is in the shop, maybe you could find it, the U-View light, that works on a lot of different spectrums, and that is super important, where if you're working on a vehicle, I know years back when I originally bought my black light kit, well, guess what? When I bought the black light kit, it had certain type of dye that came with it. Well, I didn't know that. After a while, I bought dye from this part store, that part store. Then I could not find the leak as well. And what I found out is the spectrum is totally different on different dyes.
Yeah, that's
This black light that Alex will be getting me, hopefully he didn't really have to go outside there, did he?
Yeah, no, he's still.
In the
I don't know,
pouring
he's gonna
rain.
walk right by. We'll show you this light, and then I'm going to talk about ultrasound, which is really, really important. As I was saying, with ultrasound, my daughter years back, here it goes, the little, is that the U-View one? Okay. This little U-View light, don't be afraid to walk into the screen. This little light here is really neat for a couple of different reasons. Hold that a second, Pete. I'm going to shine this light here. It's a rechargeable light. The nice thing as well, it is, whoop, did my battery go down?
You broke your leg.
Okay, it does have a zoom. You can see I could point this down, and hopefully you can see that on the camera.
Yes, it shows up.
I can make that nice and small. I can make the area nice and big. It's a little light that is adjustable and works on a lot of different spectrums. A lot of my students, when I say students, guys in the business have this light, they really, really like it. It's not a commercial for them. I believe this light is good. Now, let me get back to my daughter's story. Okay? She was living in Baltimore at the time, and she said, hey, Dad, my air conditioning's no good again. The kid would have to drive all the way up. I'd take a look at it. I couldn't find dye in the drip hole. I looked everywhere. Okay? When I took this unit here, and this is a ultrasound unit, it's a little, if we see, we can see this little scale there. It'll pick anything up that's actually coming out. Comes with ears, an earphone that basically plugs into this, and you can hear the noise. Now again, this is not an electronic ear. That's a mistake everyone makes. This is ultrasound. When I put this all around the vehicle, on the outside, the condenser, didn't hear anything. As soon as I put this near the drip tube or in the vents inside the car, I heard a noise. Now, how do you confirm it's a noise? I took my refrigerant identifier and I looked at how many bars came up as well. It was about a bar or two. When I used the refrigerant identifier to make sure nothing was in there, I recovered all the refrigerant. There was no noise. I listened and listened. As soon as I started putting stuff in, bingo. Well, make a long story short, when I took the whole dashboard apart, oh, there was dye there. It was covered by a ton of lead and debris, so it had to be peeled away to see it. This is the way to look for an AC leak. Besides using it on many, many other things, any type of noise, but again, this is ultrasound. Yes, Pierre?
The question on the electronic, the new standard electronic detector.
Yes.
The question was, can it really tolerate water like from a drain?
I've used mine several times, and as much as I try, and the question is, will it tolerate water? The 2791, the particular tool that I own, yes, has gotten wet. Don't advise it, but it has gotten wet from time to time and still functions just fine. You know, I'm sure that when they design it, you know, they consider that in the real world. I wouldn't go and dip it in a bucket, you know, to find out, because it does use, and this one does use a pump to draw in air across the heated sensor. So I don't want to do that, but a modicum of caution certainly recommended. But yeah, I think if you get it once, it's not going to kill it.
Any other questions?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So no question on the leak detection. If you Google that, guys, you will find that there are several products available on the market for that. Just I saw one from Robin Air, you know, for that, just expressly advertised for that purpose. So a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah. And same with ultrasound. If they're looking for ultrasound, I think there's a company down in North Carolina called Ultraphonics. As I know, I have another unit. This one was from White Industry. White, as far as I know, is not in business. It was a part of Snap-on, but I'm not sure. So you may want to Google that as well. But Ultraphonics, I have a very expensive unit that I hooked to my lab scope, which I really used on my daughter's car, not this one. And what I basically seen was when there was a leak, there was a lot of choppiness. As soon as I took the refrigerant out, it was like your flat line, just like you would see on someone dying in a hospital.
Yeah, and this not, again, just like with the thermal imager, using it for refrigerant leaks is not the only use.
No, there's
for
many,
an ultrasound device. What about looking for wind noises? You know,
perfect.
Yeah, you can hear them. There, I'm sure there's plenty that you exhaust leaks, all kinds of stuff that come to mind. Dye. G already kind of hit someone on the dye. I'm not going to nail that one to death. Dye is very popular, you know, to find leaks. I love it.
I love it.
You know. But there are some cautions. You can overdose the system. You can put too much in. One of the shops I worked at used to have these huge bottles of oil dye, right?
Just keep
and once you know, I mean, these guys are putting in 2 ounces at a time. You've got systems on cars today, guys, that don't hold that much oil.
Right.
You know, if you have 5 quarts in the car, are you going to dump 2 more in it? You know, just to get the dye in? No, of course not. Same thing. That compressor is a mini engine, mini power.
And we're talking a very small amount, and many companies actually have dye in it from the factory.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, of course, not even going to get started on the hybrid issue.
Right.
Well, actually, you are, because there's a question.
Okay, well, there's a question. Let's have the question.
And the question is, can dye be used in hybrid vehicles with ND11 oil?
You know,
well, there are some companies that state on a hybrid vehicle that uses the ND oil, they say that the dye could be used in there.
Yeah.
Now, I would always recommend that you read TSBs and follow, especially if we're on a hybrid or an electric vehicle, I would follow the manufacturer's recommendations.
I would have to agree with that. If you don't see that the OEM has allowed the use of dye in their products, no matter what the claim of the aftermarket might be, I personally would have to tend to shy in favor, mainly from the liability standpoint, because I know, for example, like Honda, it says you contaminate their system and you run the car, it's an electric compressor, you replace everything. You know, and that's not your customer doing that, guys, that's you. So just like we talked about with some other issues tonight, it's your calling. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but me personally.
And real quick, on servicing a hybrid air conditioning system, you know, if you're going to try to use your regular 134 machine that you've been putting regular oil through, because it's an alkaline type of oil, the oil is totally different. You cannot use that oil unless you have another thing from AirSep that is actually something that'll clean your hoses out, or an air conditioning machine that flushes the hoses backwards to make sure there is no residual oil, you know, other than the specified oil that you're going to be putting in just for that hybrid you're going to need a separate machine.
Yeah, and you and Dave Hobbs did a great job of that in one of our previous AC
Yeah,
webinars.
so please look
Again,
back to that.
Look that up, you know, on our YouTube channels, either TSTs or the Motor Age, and it'll be there for you. Lots of information on that. All right, some other things with the die. You know, it's not going to happen right away. A lot of the factories, they actually give you the wafers, right? That can take up to 2 weeks to incorporate the system. A system that has a low refrigerant charge to begin with is not going to pass the die through the system as quickly, if at all, because that affects
Because remember, oil doesn't flow like in the old days.
Right.
It's totally different.
So yeah, so there's a few tips for your die.
Question, not a die question. I've seen nitrogen used by many techs. Is that an effective automotive use?
Funny.
I knew that question was
Nitrogen being used in an AC system. Why don't you take that?
let me take on the official position. A couple of things with nitrogen. Yes, it's a dry gas. It's not going to hurt the system. But number one, you get the tank of nitrogen, that's under a whole lot of pressure. Much more than your system can handle, right? So you don't want to be busting evaporators or blowing up lines,
No doubt.
you know, with that kind of pressure. The second thing is if you're using it to use, like, what, I guess, what are you going to use? Soap bubbles or something? What are you going to use to detect the nitrogen, like, other than that?
Right. It's different if you're using CO2, but again, the same caution some manufacturers will tell you, putting even an inert gas in there,
Right.
you know, could be an issue. But I would think CO2 would be a lot easier to use if it's regulated, not putting, you know, what your bottle has 1,000 pounds of pressure in there, but regulating it somewhere down to about a 300-pound range, and then using a gas analyzer and look for CO2 leaks.
Yeah. No, well, and as far as actual use, I think some heavy-duty makers allow the use, or, you know, say it's okay to use nitrogen in the system. Not familiar with any
Automotive.
automotive applications. And again, that goes back to what we've always said, you always defer to the OEM's recommendations.
You know, and again, if you're not regulating or your regulators are off and you're putting this high pressure in,
Right.
there is a danger of something blowing up. A lot of these things are now composite evaporators, or the connection lines that are snap connections. You exceed the pressure that system could actually put out or handle,
Right.
then you may get hit in the face, God forbid, with a hose, or any metal may come blowing apart, or plastic.
I would
So-
say that with any of the methods that we talked about tonight, the one that excites me the most, if you're having a really tough leak, is the use of ultrasound.
Ultrasound.
That's not going to
kicks
hurt
butt.
anybody.
Nothing. And you will find it with that.
Yeah.
And again, you can do some research. Any other questions, Pierre?
No, actually, just a comment. Our video is lagging. It's that storm probably messed up the internet a little bit.
Yeah, pardon for any interferences tonight, guys. We really had some really heavy weather passing through the area. You may have heard the background noises. The roof is getting pelted.
Or if you're seeing everything on your screen there, Pierre, it may be on their end.
No, actually, I've seen it
You
blacking
see it
out.
lagging?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. One of the last things I want to get to, because we're getting kind of short on time. Are you legal? Do you have that little card in your wallet that says you're Section 6?
Sure, I'm legal. I was born here. What are you talking about?
You know, any legal authority can walk into your shop tomorrow and ask to see that card. If you can't produce that card, then you're servicing AC systems illegally, and you could get fined big bucks.
Big time.
Big
Fines
bucks.
always start at least $10,000. So anyone in your shop that's working on an air-conditioned system, doesn't mean that you have one guy there certified. If that guy is actually performing an AC job on a vehicle,
Right.
and he's not 609 certified, then you're going to run into a legal issue. So make sure you can go to our buddies here at Mobile Air Conditioning Society. They have I think they have a write-in test.
Yeah, they have different ways that you can take the 609 through MACS. They're not the only ones. ASE also offers a 609 certification. There's some other suppliers
That's
you can get it
correct.
done. As Peter mentioned earlier at the beginning of the webinar, you know, it's an online test, 15 bucks.
Right.
So
You're
I
done.
mean, you're done. I do want to point out there that MACS also offers a lot of, I mean, this is what they do. They're
Their
the AC
business. Our
cooling
buddy Paul
industry.
D. Giuseppe.
A lot of really good training information available on their website. You can go to the website, hit the training tab, and learn about upcoming events in your area. Online, your resources. They just came out with a new textbook for AC repair. Just a lot of good stuff there for you.
Yeah. Question.
Another question. This is a good one. When I replace a compressor and the new compressor has oil in it, should I vac out the old oil and then recharge? And how do I know how much oil to use?
You're gonna have to take the oil out from the compressor and measure it. Look up, specifications are good, look up to see what, or how much oil, I should say, goes in that. And if you have something in the condenser, you're gonna have to take a condenser out, pour it upside down, see what comes out if there's no specification on it. Most of the times, if you look up in All Data or an OE website or whatever, you're gonna find that it'll say, install a couple of ounces of oil in this component.
Well, I recently talked to the folks at Delphi. Okay, we were doing a little, and it's on YouTube for you guys. Their compressor comes with the right oil charge, and it says it's right there.
There's a little
charge,
tag, right?
But that's the secret. When you get the new compressor, that stuff that's got writing on it in the box, you're supposed to read that. You know,
That's a good idea.
There's some good information there, and that will help tell you. Another thing I want to mention, since the topic of oil came up, oil balancing. If you're replacing, maybe the compressor's okay, but you're putting in a new condenser or accumulator, you know, use the procedure and the service information for adding the correct amount of oil for that particular replacement. Again, these things are using much less oil than they did in the past.
Right.
Even an ounce can be
Throw you off.
can be too much. So
Exactly.
you gotta make sure you do it right.
And that brings it to a point when everyone always adds oil and oil. If you're adding either a dye or an oil that are approved, you got to be careful that you don't overcharge it. It'll make the system not function as designed.
Absolutely.
So be very careful out there if you're doing that. We have time for one last question because we are running behind.
It's a shame because we have two.
All right. Well,
All right,
okay,
two
both.
questions. One is a
Quick.
guy says he's taken the 609 test twice in his career. He can't find his card. How can he retrieve it from MACS?
MACS, just contact MACS and you can get it.
Yeah,
You just
they can look that for you.
send your name. I believe it's your license number because when I teach the class, I take everyone's license number from their state and you would just tell them you're from New York, for argument's sake, your number is 12345. With your name, send it in to MACS and they'll send you a card. There may or may not be a fee. And I've had students lose the card and I know they've gotten it, but I'm not sure if there's a fee. There may
Right.
be.
Sure.
Second question, if shops can find technicians for not being certified, why can cans of 134A be available to the public at Walmart?
Okay. The question was, you know, if shops and technicians could be fined, how come cans could be sold at Walmart, Kmart, whatever, and the consumer's not? Well, it's just the way the law is. You know, there's crazy laws out there, and we don't have time to
You're doing
get
it for compensation.
Yeah, well, that's the little
law.
rule.
You're doing, and guys, this means that if you go home to your neighbor's house and he gives you a six-pack for fixing his AC system,
compensation.
that's compensation. You have to be 609 certified. But yes, the debate with the DOI cans, write your state legislators and tell them how you feel. And you want that
Exactly.
off the shelves.
You know, because I don't mind the guy giving me a six-pack. You know what I'm saying? In fact, we need a six-pack after this.
Anyway, to close up real quick, guys, thanks for coming out with us tonight.
Yep.
A couple of announcements. In just a week,
Just a week.
our buddy Wayne Colonna is going to be right here at the TST
Yep.
studios.
He will be up here and we'll be doing some neat things. Check out our website for information. We'll be doing some real live stuff on a car, getting him all ready and prepped for the Motor Age webcast. That is going to be Powertrain Pro, and that comes up June 20th. And oh no, that's his. Yeah, to see
Yes.
you repair or replace June 20th, and you could sign up for that as well.
Both of these, of course, free to attend. Wayne Colonna, not only a renowned trainer in transmissions, but also
the
now
man.
the publisher of Powertrain Pro with the Motor Age family.
Right.
You may have seen his stuff here since he started with us in January.
And we're glad he came on board.
Absolutely.
You know, he's really a unbelievable guru, I'll use the word guru, in the transmission field. So
Yeah.
Wayne Colonna next week, and then again on June 20th.
2020.
And I guess that's about it,
I guess
Mr.
that's
Pete.
about it, guys. Once again, thanks so much for joining us, and hey, see you in the Funny Papers.
You got it. Thank you. Have a good night.